Marketing here for our November 2015 webinar. And November is Thanksgiving. That's what it's all about. And so I personally am very thankful to have my buddy, Alex Hambrick, on the call with us. Alex, thank you very much for participating in our webinar this month.
You are too kind, and no problem at all.
So Alex is the VP over at Engage, or are you the president now? Are you the founder and the okay, vice president? There we go. I'm not good with titles. I like to make up my own titles. But we've been working with Alex and Engage, the company, for years and years now. And those of you that don't know who Engage is, they do chat, provide a chat service, and their whole world is revolved around leads and lead acquisition, getting traffic to turn into a lead of some sort. And there's different kinds of leads, and we're going to talk about all this. And so, Alex, I don't know anybody else really that has done as much study as you guys do with split tests and everything else on how to convert traffic into leads, right?
I'd like to think so, yeah. I mean, we spend an inordinate amount of time looking at way too many numbers that are probably good for one person.
Well, but it's good because data doesn't lie, and you know, that's really what informs your decisions. So, well, let's get into it. Thanks again for joining, everybody, and I'll just some housekeeping stuff. If you have questions, go ahead and put them in the little question box there, and then I'll read them, and if it's an appropriate time, we'll go ahead and answer them. If not, we'll save them until the end, or send you an email with the response, depending upon how long-winded Alex is today. But you know, we're going to be giving you guys a lot of good information to take away with on how to convert your traffic into leads. So let's get into it. So what are we going to learn today, Alex?
Well, we're going to start by just talking about how to actually generate the leads themselves. And by that I mean you've got the people to your website. Now how do you get them from a visitor into an actual contact? And that's sort of what Engage focuses the most on in terms of our research. We have boatloads of data on what works and what doesn't at converting visitors into leads. But that's only really half the picture, because leads don't pay the bills, clients do. And so that conversion process of converting them from a lead into a client is another battle that you have to fight. And we try to collect as much information as we can on that side of things as well. And so we've learned over the years what works and what doesn't in terms of actually converting that lead that you've gotten from your website. And it doesn't just have to be chat. It can be a contact form. It can be a phone call. Any sort of lead, what works and what doesn't for converting that into a client. And so
Alex,
we're going to talk about...
Alex, let me ask you a question real quick, just so people know. I mean, you know, you've got data from how many different law firm websites or different websites altogether that you're knowledgeable about?
Well, right now we've got this on about 5,500 websites.
So that's, I mean, that's a lot of testing to see what works, not only from conversion from traffic to lead, but as you say, of course, from lead to intake or, you know, sale, depending upon what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. And we see a lot of pretty common mistakes that people make on the intake side of things once we've actually sent them the lead. I'm going to talk about a few of those. We're also going to talk about just, you know, managing your employees and the people who are doing your intake, and how to hold them accountable in a way that's fair and doesn't make them feel like they're, you know, it's 1984 or something. We're also going to talk about the dreaded voicemail, which holds a special black place in my heart. And then just kind of a couple best practices, bullet points that you can kind of go down the list to sum everything up. And then I guess that last one sort of needs to be grouped in with the first one on how to generate leads, because that's sort of
Right.
where I'm going to touch on that. So that's my bad for putting those bullet points out of order. But
All right, so let's talk about this. How do we generate some leads based on our traffic?
yeah, so I mean the first thing that you kind of have to accept is that unless you're some large national firm that spends millions of dollars on advertising, your website by itself just isn't going to get enough traffic to do any sort of statistically valid split testing in any reasonable amount of time. It's just that's the numbers. Most people who visit your site don't contact you, which means it takes a lot of visitors to really be able to say A is better than B. So
Right, for split testing purposes, that's what you mean.
Yeah, exactly. And so in terms of what to do about it, you want to be working with a company or somebody who does have the data. Numbers don't lie, like you said. And if your goal is conversion, you want to go with the stuff that's been proven to work empirically and on a large scale. And this doesn't mean that you need to have a cookie cutter website that looks like every other attorney website out there. I mean, the fact is probably 90% of the changes that you make to your website aren't going to make a bit of difference in terms of your conversion. And so in those areas, you can have a field day. You can go wild. What you need to worry about is that 10% where it does make a difference, where changing that one thing can make the difference between getting 50 leads a month or getting 30 leads a month. And so that's kind of the trust the data part of things. Money makes the world go round. Google AdWords, as much as I hate to say it, Google is a business. Their goal that they say is to provide great search results to people, but really their actual goal is to make money, like so much money they could swim in a big pool of it like Scrooge McDuck. And so relying on SEO, which is basically just gaming Google's system, is doomed to failure because Google wants SEO to fail. Google wants you to not trust anybody who claims they can get you to the first page of Google, so that way you're driven straight into the arms of Google AdWords. And it's sad, but it works. They own Google. We play by their rules. And so, if you want guaranteed traffic, the only way to get it is to pay the man. And we've seen the numbers. It's really, really effective. Paid advertising in general converts much better than organic or referral traffic. The downside is it's also really, really expensive. I mean, somebody's got to pay for Google's multiple houseboats. And then, of course, I've got my shameless plug. You should be using live chat, plain and simple. Obviously, since I run a live chat company, you can't take my word for it. So just ask anybody who uses live chat. We are running a little promotion here that I'll talk about at the end, but that's the end of my shameless sales pitch. I'll keep it short and sweet.
Well, I mean, I will second that, and just to talk about, Google and what they're up to, you're right. I mean, Google's a company that's out to make money just like any other company, and they do make a lot of money through their AdWords and their pay-per-click. I would just say that, you want to be in all these places. You want to be there. I mean, if you want a volume of traffic, certainly pay-per-click is an option, and you've got to, it's just advertising. It's the cost of advertising. Just like you pay for media time on TV or the radio, you have to pay for time on Google. There's other ways to get traffic that may or may not provide better. You're a more perfect client that's specific. I've seen cases come in, the biggest whales come in both ways. But you're right, Alex, in terms of massive traffic, that's what you want. And I would say, too,
and by no means, and by no means am I suggesting that you should only do that. You still need to have organic placement. You still need to be out there in the community. You still need to,
Yeah,
like you said, you need to be in all the places.
you need to be in the three places. I mean, you need to be organic, you need to be pay-per-click, you need to be local, and there's different strategies for each one of those. But ultimately, it's driving traffic based on a certain search to any page of your website. And I can tell you, as a partner of, Alex and I have been working together for years, that our clients that use chat have significant increase in their leads. Whether it's the kind of lead that they're looking for, that has to do with the kind of content that's bringing that person or that ad that's bringing that particular individual to participate in the chat. So for those of you who are that like, oh, I had chat and it didn't work, it's not that chat doesn't work. Sometimes chat works too well, and you might be like, look at this giant bill that I'm paying for chat that none of these were good cases. Well, that doesn't mean that the chat system didn't work to get you those particular leads. It's that you perhaps were not marketing properly through content or paid ads to draw the right traffic. So it's just make sure, if you're investing in whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that you're advertising or you're baiting your perfect client always. Right, Alex?
Absolutely. I mean, I see a lot of firms who get a boatload of chats, but most of them aren't particularly relevant to their firm, and that's because they're just casting this really wide net and don't really have an idea of who their perfect client is.
Right, and that it's not that the chat system doesn't work. It's just because they haven't identified in particular. It's no different than going out and fishing, and you're catching all the wrong fish that you don't want to catch. Come to find out you're just using the wrong bait, and if you just change the bait, you'll catch the right fish. It's as simple as that, really.
Exactly.
And another thing is working with your company is really great because you work with your clients. So if they're getting leads that are not what they're looking for, you work with them to make sure that they are, so you guys can work that out. That's one of the other great things about working with you guys, is that you're if it's not the good kind of lead, then you'll credit them back, and you're very easy to work with. That's what I hear from all our clients.
Yeah, and like I said, a lot of our clients do get a pretty decent amount of irrelevant traffic to their site and thus irrelevant chats, and so
right.
We've developed a lot of ways to pretty quickly identify where the irrelevant chats are coming from and why, and so we've gotten pretty good at cutting out a lot of the stuff that is kind of a waste of time and a waste of money for you.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think you guys got a great service, so couldn't endorse it more.
Thank you.
All right, what are we looking at here? Getting users to pick up the phone. What are we saying here, Alex?
Well, so I'm a pretty big fan of vanity phone numbers. I mean, it doesn't have to be 1-800-LAWYER or anything like that. For a couple reasons. I mean, in most situations, they're really not that expensive. I mean, if you're going like I said, 1-800-LAWYER, yeah, you're probably going to have to pay money for that. But I've heard enough anecdotal evidence to be convinced of their value. But furthermore, it just makes sense to me because there are three facts that I've seen on the internet side of things that do have me convinced of this. The first one is that the majority of people don't contact an attorney on their first visit to an attorney's website. So this means that that probably 95 to 98% of the people who visit your site are floating around there, not having contacted you, but that means they're still interested in hiring an attorney. That's the other thing we've seen, is that remarketing, it works. Yep. Remarketing, for those who don't know, is displaying ads to people who have seen your site before. And the implication of this is that just because somebody didn't contact you the first time around doesn't mean that they're not interested. And finally, people still use the phone. I mean, I think that's pretty obvious to most of you out there. I think a lot of on the marketing side we tend to forget because a lot of this is so internet based, but people still use the phone. And so if you have a memorable number taking up space in their head, it's a lot more likely that they're going to call you rather than their competitor. And Tom was talking about the local advertising. It's pretty important there too because it keeps the people who have seen your ads, whether it's a billboard or a bus ad or whatever it might be, from accidentally finding their way to your competitor's site. If they see your ad and then they don't remember what number they're supposed to call or who they're supposed to call, chances are they're going to go on the internet to find out. And that just happens to be where all your competitors are lurking, trying to steal that lead away. I don't have, I don't have a financial interest in vanity phone numbers. It's just something that I've heard enough success stories about, and just from looking at visitor behavior, it seems to make sense to me.
Yeah,
I know
I
I have
mean
an
it's
easier
kind
time
of counter to
remembering.
it's counter to what you offer as a business, but you're right. I mean, and it's funny because the, no matter what, your best, most sophisticated, probably some of the top clients that have contacted, certainly the people that are listening or that contact law firms or anybody really, pick up the phone and do it because they're going to be able to get their questions answered quicker and move things along faster. And you're right. I mean, this is brand recognition. You don't want to have brand confusion. If you can have a good phone number that ties you to that number, your brand to that number, people will remember it. And I mean, Alex, you're 100% right. You don't want to send people back to the cesspool of the internet where there's all kinds of people waiting to grab their business. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. And this is, we get this a lot where clients will be like, well, I'm not getting a lot of web contacts, but the phone sure is ringing a lot. Well, I mean, it all connects together, right? I mean, they could have do a search for some kind of question that they have about their particular case, come to your website, hey, this is pretty good, but they're not ready to talk to anybody yet. And then they go look at a bunch of other websites and they're like, hey, I want to go back and look at that, what that first guy said. And then they go back and they might chat with somebody to get more information. And then they might call again later on, depending upon the urgency that particular person has. But, I mean, you're right. The more memorable that you are, I mean, if you can get your brand, your name in there, that's probably the best thing to do. If I could get 100 Foster Web rules, right? That's what we should
You
do.
think that might be like one too many letters, Foster Web rules? But
whatever. You can just keep on punching them in.
yeah. And it's a common misconception that on the chat side of things, our goal is just get as many chats as possible and screw everything else. I mean, our goal is to get as many leads as possible for your firm,
And
regardless
cases,
of
right?
how they come in.
Right.
Because yeah, we don't get paid if a phone call comes in. We don't get paid if they fill out the contact form, but that's fine because the more cases you get in the door, the bigger you're going to get, which means you're going to be spending more on advertising, which means sooner or later you're going to be getting more chat. So we want you to grow. Yeah, processes, my favorite word. Super fun. So, like I mentioned, converting a person from a visitor to a lead is only really half the battle. You've got to convert them from a lead to a case. And to do this effectively at any sort of scale, you have to have some sort of process in place. It's fine to wing it. That's what we did when we first started. I think that's what every business
That's what
has to
everybody
do when they
does.
first start. Yeah. And the thing with winging it and going with your gut feeling is it works probably 75% or 80% of the time, but the bigger you get and the more competitive you get, suddenly that 75 to 80% isn't quite enough. And if you want to start hiring people, if you want to start taking vacations and not worrying about the wheels falling off the wagon while you're gone, you've got to have a playbook for people to follow. And furthermore, it's the right thing to do by your
Your client.
workers.
Yeah, and your
It,
clients.
yeah, absolutely. Because if your time is divided all over the place, that means you can't provide as good of a service to your clients. And if you don't have some sort of objective standard to judge your employees, that's not really fair to them. Employees, they want to know what they're doing right and what they're doing wrong and what they can be doing better. And if everybody's winging it, you can't tell them any of that. Um, and there's a lot of stuff that you can have processes for. I mean, technically you could have a process for anything, but I think some of the big ones are having a process for when somebody calls in to your office. So in most cases, this is a phone script. You also want to have a process for when somebody leaves a message for your office, whether it's a chat or somebody fills out one of your web forms, whether somebody leaves a voicemail, which should never happen. I'll get to that later. Also, having a process for their appointment, basically for closing them. I think a lot of you will probably be doing the closing yourself, in which case you probably don't need a process. But if you have intake specialists or associates who are doing that, then you need a process for that too. And that kind of leads into the next slide, which is accountability is super important. Like if you can't answer these 3 questions that are on the screen, you need more accountability. If you don't know who your best intake people are, and if you don't know why they're your best, and if you don't know how you're trying to create and cultivate new all-stars, so to speak, you need to be stepping up your game. You need
So
to measure.
Alex, what do you mean by all-star? What does that mean in your mind? What are you saying there? I mean, like, what is an
Somebody who,
all-star first? Somebody in a law firm.
well, I mean, so it depends on their role, obviously, but let's take an intake person, for example. An all-star would be somebody who closes, say, I'm just pulling numbers out of a hat here, 1 out of 3 people they talk to versus, somebody who's maybe not as good who's only closing 1 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
The important thing is you have to define your all-stars for yourself. You need to look at the roles that your employees play. And one person can play several different roles. That's fine. You need to look at those roles and come up with ways to define what's success and what's not. With intake, most of the time that is how many people you've converted from a call into an appointment. For your associates or your people who are actually closing, you want to know how many appointments they've converted into cases. On the more operations side of things, like once you've actually signed them up and they're a client, you want to know how quickly your people are, getting the paperwork out the door, what their turnaround time is on a lot of this busy work.
But it's
I know
really
this is sort of.
because, well,
Oh, go
let
ahead.
me just interject something, Alex, because we get this a lot where we'll talk to, and it's not just lawyers, doctors as well, where they're like, well, if they come in or if they call, I'm going to close them. We hear this all the time.
Mm.
And I would just say that, and that's from a variety of different kinds of professions, lawyers. I mean, there's lots of different kinds of lawyers. There's the contingency plaintiff lawyers. There's the transactional based, and each one of you in your own unique little niche has their own style, their own way of closing the kind of cases and clients that you want. And so when you're trying to come up with who are your all-stars, you can't just hire a bunch of people and expect them to know what you're looking for. You have to teach them. And it's really working with some of your top people that probably have the best attitude. They're just people persons, people's people. And let me just throw in something else. if you're hiring somebody, you guys got to talk to Jay Henderson. And what is it? Real people, real talent, real talent hiring.com. Sorry, and we'll send that out in the email. This is a guy that you have to talk to when you're looking for people. He'll tell you whether or not they're an all-star or have the capability of being an all-star. But then, yeah, I mean, like, and they have to be good regardless of where they are, whether that's intake or maybe they've already you've already signed up the case. But you could lose it if all your flash is in the very beginning. Make sure that the people that are working with them all the time are all-stars. And once again, this has just got to be the way that you want your people to behave. Don't turn your back on it. You have to constantly monitor it and make sure it's meeting your goals and your needs. Right, Alex?
Absolutely. And you can't just follow a cookie cutter approach to this, because as you touched on, you're catering it towards your perfect client, which means
Right.
what works for you isn't going to necessarily work for the guy next door. And that's why when Tom asked what an all-star means, I said you have to define it for yourself. You have to recognize your own all-stars, and like Tom said, they people persons or people. Is that a double negative there?
Yeah, there you go. Whatever.
You, they need to be encouraged, but also the people who aren't as good need to have somebody to look up to.
Right.
You're not going to be there 24/7 to tell them what to do and how to do it, and you shouldn't be there. And they need people in your absence who they can look up to and model themselves off of and serve as an implicit role model for when you're not there to coach them yourself. Because ultimately, I think what most business owners' goals are, regardless of whether you're a lawyer, a doctor, a web marketer, is to have a business that such that you can work when you want to work and not work when you don't want to work.
But you got to get the hell out of the way. You got to get good people in there and have those good people be training other good people. So so you don't have to do it all.
Exactly. And as you mentioned pretty early on, that can be a disservice to your actual clients if you're doing everything, because
totally
that means you're not helping your clients.
And we get this a lot too, where they'll be like, oh, you can call me on my cell phone, I'll answer any time. That's not kind of the approach that you want to take, that almost desperate attitude. I mean, like, does that mean that if you're in the middle of a deposition on my behalf, that you're going to take a call from another opportunity? When you're already hired by me. So you just got to be careful about the message that you're sending out. Certainly, you're going to be someone will respond as quickly as possible, but if you're responding to everything, that's just not realistic, and that's not something you're going to continue.
And I definitely see and hear that a lot, like the whole, here's my cell phone, I answer it 24/7. I mean, it's not true. Like, you can't literally be answering the phone 24/7, but like you said, I think it can be disrespectful to your existing clients, because that implies that they are secondary to the next new money that's walking through the door.
Right.
Now, I think you can certainly keep your marketing message separate and kind of quarantined from the way you act around your existing clients, but if you put it out there that you're available 24/7 and you're not, you've gone back on a promise there.
That's true, and that will affect your credibility. And people these days are, as we've talked about in past webinars over and over again about reviews, they're quick to jump online and blast you. As a matter of fact, Michelle Davis, who's the wife of Chris Davis, injury trial lawyer out in Seattle, just sent me some examples of how they've fixed bad reviews because of misunderstanding. People simply calling and not being able to talk to an attorney immediately. This sent this person directly to Google Plus to post a terrible review about She didn't even talk to them. And so you have to be very careful about what you're putting out there, about what you're willing to do, because of what people's expectations are. So it can have far-reaching effects by not being able to stand behind. And you don't need to say I'll answer my cell phone, all 24 hours a day. People don't really expect that anyway, and you need to have some kind of understanding with them. You're not going to take everybody like that. That's just, you shouldn't do that. If you are, stop. Stop if you're doing it.
And also, like, most of the time, these people don't need to talk directly to you. If they're,
I guess there's certain situations, like DUI or criminal, or I guess there's certain kinds of emergency situations where that needs to happen. But for the most part,
absolutely. Yeah, and I think, for those emergency situations, your hopefully team of all-stars can use discretion and make that call.
And I think somebody should always be answering the phone, just not necessarily the lawyer or the doctor themselves, especially like the doctor where they're going to be in surgery answering the phone. All right, I think that we beat this one up. Right, Alex?
I think we can beat this horse some more.
Okay.
Let's go. Yeah, so, and actually this kind of, what you just said about somebody does need to be on the phone, or somebody needs to be answering the phone, that kind of ties into, I think it's this next slide.
Yeah, this is a good one that we'll get into.
Oh wait, no, it's the slide after, so we'll get to this, we'll get to that in just a second. Yeah, common intake mistakes, I guess I can talk about it a little bit here now, is not having somebody available. If somebody calls in and you don't have somebody there, that's a huge missed opportunity. And I'll get into more detail on the next slide. But how fast is too fast to follow up with a contact? I think most of you probably know that this is a trick question, and the answer is you can't be fast enough. There have been many studies done on this, including studies done by companies much larger than Engage. The faster you follow up with somebody, the more likely it is that you're going to get them on the phone and convert them, plain and simple. There's a lot of there's question marks surrounding where the drop-off is, like where if you don't call them before this amount of time, your chances drop dramatically. Some studies say it's 5 minutes, some say it's 15 minutes. I think pretty much all of them say that like after an hour is terrible. Part of your process needs to be that when somebody reaches out and contacts your firm, whether it's through live chat or through the contact form on your site or maybe email,
or
you need to follow up.
Yeah, it needs to be. You're right, and we just talked about this at the conference, and actually I think in our last webinar, about how fast you need to respond to any kind of call, whether it's the best case in the world or not. Remember that you're being judged and graded on how you communicate and respond, no matter what it is. And so, I totally agree, Alex. You've got to jump on this as soon as possible, and not having enough staff is not an excuse. You've got to. This is one of the most important things that you need to do. The other thing too is, you're paying for all this. Let me just make this point, Alex, and then I'll shut up for a minute. But you're paying for all this traffic in one way or another, whether it's your time by adding content, whether it's giving Google money for AdWords, or social media, or TV or radio, whatever you're doing, you're paying for this traffic. And we see this too. We see the opposite thing, where firms or doctors' offices, I've seen it both ways, have done such a great job of marketing that they weren't prepared to do the intake. In other words, they had so many leads come in that they were not able to respond and sign up all those leads, which is a terrible problem. Some people are like, hey, that's a good problem to have. No, it's not.
No,
it's a terrible problem. You just blew all that money.
It's an avoidable problem.
Right. And so you got to think about that.
Even if you don't have the staff, like you said, that's not an excuse.
Right.
There are answering services out there, and I'll get into that more a couple slides from now. But don't be afraid of having somebody else answer the phones for you. Probably the most common objection I hear to that when I make that as a suggestion is, well, I don't want somebody else talking on behalf of my firm, or I think it creates a bad impression. Not getting to talk to anybody creates a bad impression.
Yep.
Having a robot voicemail deal with your clients is infinitely worse than an actual person.
Or having a voicemail that is in like 2 or 3 different languages before you can actually leave a message. It's another one. I've heard them all.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is, because we capture all, or in most cases, all the contacts, whether it's a web form or chat or telephone, everything is tracked in DSS. And Alex, I can't tell you how many times I've sat on the phone with clients and gone over their contact list that's in DSS, and they don't recognize any of the people that are, because they haven't talked to them, and they're like, who talked to that person? Who talked to that person? And you need to make sure that you're using a system that is responsive enough, and certainly they're going to get a notice from you guys. If they get a chat, they can get a notice in email, they can get a notice on a text notice, and you also have a chat to call or a click to call, right, feature, like if they need to talk to you right now.
Yeah, they can do like a live transfer right there.
Right, and that, I mean, and so I've heard the other thing, like I didn't even know I had that lead, and it's a great lead, or it looks like a great opportunity. It's like a week later. So you want to make sure that you're using a system that you can check. Don't rely on email alone, because email is fraught with problems. You could get, like you get stuck in a spam filter. Don't rely on texting alone. Like that's one of the reasons why we have that in DSS, is so you can look directly in there to make sure that you are responding to all the leads as soon as possible.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, if you look at a lead and don't recognize it, that should be a badge of shame right there.
Right there, something's wrong. Right.
Yeah.
It doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to take them all, but you at least need to know, oh yeah, we turned them down because of this, we added them to this list. Another thing too, real quick, is that a lead is a lead, and just because there's leads that are immediate opportunities to turn into a case or a client. Then there are, and there's a small percentage of those of all your overall traffic and all your overall leads. The larger percentage of the leads that you're going to get, you're not going to be able to sign up for whatever reason, whether it's a case that you're not going to take, or you're not interested in, or they're not going to take you. But that doesn't mean that you just throw that lead away. That lead goes in a different pile. That goes on your newsletter, that goes on your, your list of people that you continue to reach out to, because that person, although they might not have hired you, could turn into a case or a client down the road, or one of their, a friend or a relative or whatever they could refer them to you. So every lead has a value. Don't just throw them away. That's another mistake that we see all the time.
Absolutely,
all right, sorry about that.
No, not a problem. I mean, this is all super useful and correct. I think one of the biggest pieces of advice I give to firms who ask for it is, look at each lead not necessarily as, oh, well, this one was a good one or a bad one, but as a as a one small part of an average. If you know that on average your cases bring in, let's say, $5,000 to your firm, and you know that on average you've closed 1 out of 10 of your leads into cases, I think it's a lot easier to not ignore leads when you look at them like, oh, that's $500 there.
Right.
Oh, that's $500 that I just flushed down the toilet because I got an email and filed it away and never bothered to double check on it.
And you know this too. I mean, most of lawyers and doctors, business comes from referrals. And referrals are from past clients, other lawyers, or somebody that's heard of you. Friends like to help friends, and friends always ask their, relatives or their friends on services to use. And one of those services is lawyers and doctors. And so you want to make sure that, I don't know why that keeps popping up. You want to make sure that you are being that you have every opportunity to take advantage of that $500 that you spent to get that lead, to make sure that that person may refer somebody down 4 years down the road. You never know. But that ultimately, your list right there is the ultimate, that's what you're paying for when you're doing marketing, is that list.
Absolutely.
Anyway.
And even that list has value, because at the end of the day, X percentage of those people will eventually become clients. And,
right.
That X might be lower, but there's still money there.
Okay. So what do we mean by this ABC? What are we saying here?
This one is the old Alec Baldwin speech from Glengarry Glen Ross, always be closing. That's one of the other mistakes I see a lot, is not acting with enough urgency. The pace with which the entire process of becoming a client, that pace has increased considerably over the last, say, 10 years. And I think a lot of attorneys don't recognize the need for urgency. Like, you've got somebody on the phone, that's great, but you need to let them know, like, if they're a good case that you want to be taking, you need to let them know in no uncertain terms that you want them, because that's what people want to hear. They want to hear,
right,
this is my attorney. They want an attorney who's going to take their case. If it's a contingency fee type thing, if it's a DUI or family law, they want to know, this is an attorney who's going to take me seriously. And if you don't communicate that, then they're not necessarily going to move on, but they're going to keep looking until they find an attorney who is willing to take them seriously or is willing to express interest.
And that's to the staff too, right? I mean, it's not just the attorney. The staff has to communicate that as well, which goes back to your all-star thing.
Absolutely. I think, one of the biggest misconceptions I hear is that thinking that you as the attorney are the only person who can communicate that, who can telegraph that interest or that that desire to meet with them. Your staff can communicate that. Your staff can set an appointment in lieu of you. And there are plenty of ways to word it in such a way that doesn't get you in trouble with the local bar or any sort of legal rules regarding attorney-client privilege. As long as you word it the right way, your staff and your team can be communicating that message, and that message of, yes, I'm taking you seriously, yes, I want you as a client, yes, I would like to bring you in and talk to you and bring you on board. That message is so important to the closing process, assuming, of course, that they're the type of client that you want. And that is the other mistake that I see a lot, which is being overly accommodating with the not so perfect clients. A lot of times I see attorneys go too far in the opposite direction and just kind of open the door to anybody. But I mean, there are bad clients. There are clients who will take up 80% of your time and bring in 20% of the value, and there are clients that you don't necessarily want. And so you want to extend that message to your perfect client, and you don't want to be a jerk to the not perfect clients, but you want to cultivate and cater to those clients that you want.
Totally, your perfect client.
And then finally, we have the Debbies and the Eeyores. I call them Debbie as in Debbie Downer, and Eeyore. Well, hopefully everybody knows who Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh is. Uh, I call a
Is
lot
there
of them
another
leads.
Eeyore? Is there another Eeyore?
Well, I named both of my daughters Eeyore, so yes.
Yeah,
It's
but
hard to tell
based
them
on
apart.
Eeyore from Winnie the Pooh. I don't think that name's been used anywhere else ever. Just as a side
I would
note,
hope
we could do
not.
a research project on
I just did, and it's called Google. And
that. There you go. All
but
righty.
yeah, I call a lot of I call a lot of attorneys every day, and I call a lot of business owners every day, and I talk to a depressingly large number of sad sack, Debbie Downers, just generally unpleasant people on the phone, and a lot of times it's the mother-in-law or the cousin or the aunt or the friend of a friend that kind of found their way into your business when you were just starting and you can't quite muster up the courage to fire them. But if you've got somebody who's unpleasant on the phone, they are creating a terrible first impression for people who are contacting you. Like, it's a running joke around our office when we call somebody, law office, that's the answer that we get when we call. And
It's
I would
so
say maybe
true.
probably 1 out of 10, 1 out of 20 firms I call, that's how it's answered. Law office. And if that sounds jarring to you over the webinar, the shrill shriek of those two words, imagine how it feels for somebody who's got a legal problem.
And it's scary to pick up the phone and call a law firm if you've never done it before. Everybody's heard all the scary stuff out there, and you need to your point, you need to make it very welcome. I got a story that's right along these lines of a client who's a great client, worked with us for years, and was spending about, I don't know, $25,000 a month on pay-per-click. He's an injury lawyer. And he was getting an amazing amount of leads, and we were like, wow, this is really doing great. And we'd call him up and he'd be like, none of these are any good, we're not signing any of these cases. And we're like, you just had 200 leads in a week for exactly what you're paying for. What's the problem? And we started we listened to the transcription, or we listened to the call, the message of the call, and it was he had hired his mother-in-law to answer the phone, and she was doing exactly that, and just being very abrupt and almost abusive, and just asking, like, what insurance do you have, or what insurance, and we don't do that, we don't work with that, and just hanging up if it wasn't. And that's, you're right. I mean, like, and that was years ago, before the opportunity came about where people could go post anything that they wanted online about you and your brand. And so it's so easy to spend all that money to get all these leads, all these contacts, all these phone calls, and then just blow it, or have someone else blow it, that you can't fire, specifically your family. So don't hire your family.
Well, and the thing is, like, you don't have to fire them necessarily. That's where
Unless
the
it's your wife.
processes
That's
come in.
okay. I'm not saying
Yeah.
that,
Oh, yeah.
everyone. That's the wife or husband here. I'm just
Or
kidding.
both.
As long as
Yeah, I
they do
mean,
the
and that's
DNA
where the
test.
processes come in. Is if you have sort of an objective standard, then it's not personal. You can just look at their
Right.
numbers and say, look, 1 out of 50 people you talk to set an appointment versus 1 out of 5 for every other person here. Something's wrong. Let's figure it out.
Once again, the data will
Yeah.
tell you.
And exactly. I mean, that
And
the
this,
numbers don't
and
lie.
like Debbie's and Eeyore's, that they have a place in the world. And so it's not that they're bad people or they don't do a good job, but maybe they just don't do a good job answering the phone. Maybe they're great at, keeping your database organized, or are great at writing content and updating the websites. I mean, I'm not necessarily the best phone answerer. I'm not going to be like, hello. I mean, but that's why I have people here that answer the phone better than me, and that's the whole thing is, especially if you're like a one-man shop, and you know you're inundated with cases because you're answering the phone every time somebody calls you, you're gonna upset some people. So you know, just be careful about that. That's a great point about having that. All right, let's keep
Absolutely.
going here. I think this is the one that you wanted to. That's your biggest gripe. So what are we
Yeah.
saying? Voicemail is like the evil. What is this?
Well, it's not evil. It's just it's such a waste of money. Like if somebody is calling your firm, you need to have somebody there to talk to them. And if their call goes to voicemail, that's you know $500 flushed down the toilet or whatever your
Yeah, because
average
they're going to
lead
call the
value
next
is.
person on the list.
Exactly. You there are so many alternatives to leaving a voicemail. If somebody calls in and asks for you directly and you're not available, you can have your staff handle that call. Because you know, another thing that I can't count how many times has happened is I'll call into a law firm, ask for Bill, and I get put on hold and put straight into voicemail. No questions asked, no anything, just right to voicemail. They don't know, am I an existing client? Am I a potential client? Am I a salesperson trying to sell them some, fancy new SEO or referral service? They just straight into voicemail. And that's a problem because if I'm a potential client or even an existing client, that's not a good experience. And the other scenario is just when you call the firm and nobody's there and that automated system picks up and you've got to press 14 different things to finally leave a message, or like you said, there's 40 different languages, and finally after the end of 20 minutes of waiting you get to leave a message after the beep. There are alternatives to that. I kind of touched on it before. If you don't have the staff to handle the volume of calls that you're going to get, don't be afraid to outsource that. Don't be afraid to
Right.
have to call in a pinch hitter. There are a lot of answering services out there that are really good, and there are ones that can just handle your overflow, as in if you're not available, then they pick up. There are ones who can handle all your calls. There are ones who can just do after hours. Uh, at least on the chat side of things, almost 35% of the chats that we get come in after standard business hours. And so if you don't have somebody there to handle your calls after hours, that's 30% of your leads that you're just, again, flushing down the toilet. Because if you don't pick up, they're going to move on to the next person, and I guarantee you there's somebody in your local market who's a competitor with you that
Who's
is
answering
going
the
to answer
phone?
their phone.
Right. It's going
Yeah.
to answer the phone.
And, a lot of times this person has found their way to your site because of your advertisements, because of the money that you've spent, and then they're driven right into the arms of your competitors. So you're spending your money to advertise for your competitors if you don't have people there to take those calls after hours.
Yep.
So I'll just let that angry face sink in for a little bit.
Well, I mean, that's one of the biggest things. And if somebody is going to pick up the phone and call, I mean, like that is the best kind of lead to get, is somebody that picks up the phone and calls. They generally, like we already said, based on our experience and your experience, and we have between us, we've got a lot of experience on marketing and lead generation and turning leads into conversion and leads into cases. And the best ones are the ones that pick up the phone and call. Of course, they could have contacted you before in a different way, but they're ready to talk to you. They need answers, and they're going to call, and they're going to keep calling somebody until they get the answers that they're looking for. Okay, so I guess this is
All
just
right.
a recap, really, of what we were just going over, Alex.
This
Which
is,
is
yeah. I'm not a huge fan of the PowerPoints that just bullet point everything you're going to say. So I saved that for the end. if you're a bullet point type of person. Basically, follow up as soon as possible when people call you. Follow up multiple times. Like if you're not able to get a hold of them after they contact you, call them again. There's been a couple studies out there that kind of debate over what the optimal number is. I've seen 4, I've seen 7, I've seen 11 being thrown out there, but find the number that works for you. Don't just call them once and be done with them. Keep following up. And then when you do get them on the phone and they meet your criteria, close them. Teach your people how to close, and teach yourself how to close.
Think about your own, your own behavior. Like if you go into a Nordstrom's, the person is going to come up and ask if they can help you. Generally, most of us are like, no, I'm good. But we don't really mean that, because we want their help, just not right then. And so if you just disappear, never to come back, then they're going to go, what? Ask for somebody else. But if you're kind of hanging out, coming up and offering, when you have people come up and offer some other suggestions and other help, and that's how you should follow up. Not necessarily like, hey, are you ready to hire me yet? But you follow up and say, we talked to Mrs. Brown about your case. Just wondering if you'd gotten any of your questions answered, and here's on our website, here's a document or something I can send you that might help you in your decision making. I mean, it's not just one thing over and over again, right, Alex? I mean, we're talking about following up in a variety of different ways.
Absolutely.
And just
I mean, there are a couple of companies out there that have that write scripts and have approaches, and probably do it a lot better than I could. I think a good just rule of thumb is anytime you're following up after the first time, have some sort of reason for it besides just checking back in. It could be it could be as simple and even transparent as, just wanted to see if you had any questions about X, Y, Z, where X, Y, and Z is whatever situation they were talking about. Just wanting to see if you got the packet that we sent you and had any questions. But just have some reason to be calling besides just, hey, I'm bothering you again.
Well,
that
create
way,
a script like what you have here. Create a script that works. And
exactly.
And
the script that works for Jim Bob down the street isn't necessarily going to work for you. As I mentioned earlier, trust the data. If you've got a company that you work with that writes these scripts and has the proof to back it up, definitely start with that. But if you're just kind of doing it on your own, do what works for you. And measure, doing what works means you have to know what it means for something to work. You need to objectively measure the results, and the people who are good, you need to encourage them and give them positive reinforcement. And the people who are bad, don't give them negative reinforcement. Teach them, show them who they need to be looking up to, and then the Eeyores of the world. If they're not willing to be taught, if they're not willing to get better, then you need to find a way to get them off whatever it is they're doing badly. You don't have to fire them. You can move them around from answering the phones to, getting medical records. But if somebody's not willing to learn and get better, they don't really have a place doing whatever it is you have them doing. And then finally, I've touched on this a couple times, but outsourcing should not be a dirty word. Nothing is worse in terms of your image and the impression that you're giving than a blank slate, than somebody calling in and nobody's there. Even if it's just a person who all they can do is say, sorry, he's not in right now, can I take a message? That's better than nothing.
That's true.
And obviously I'm a bit biased because if you're using us for chat, I mean, technically that's outsourcing, quote unquote. So again, obviously I'm a bit biased here, but I've seen it enough times, hundreds if not thousands of firms who use answering services or call centers, and the results are night and day. So I can't recommend it enough.
And some are better than others, but do your research
Yeah.
on that.
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, Alex, that's all the time we got. I really appreciate you spending the time with us today to talk about how to make the most of your leads based on, you guys talk to law firms and doctors' offices all over the planet, just like we do all the time. And we shared a couple stories. We see it over and over again. This might seem elementary to people, but this is what's happening. And this is an easy way to make the most of the marketing that you're already doing. Really just taking some of these practices will improve your lead conversion and get you more cases than ignoring them all and just, focusing on pay-per-click or SEO and not focusing on the conversion element. So, Alex, if you guys offer the best chat platform out there, and I know this, we have tested them all, and we use it ourselves, Engage on our own website, and I can tell everybody that's listening on this call that Alex is a stand-up guy, great company to work with. And so if anybody is interested in finding out more about getting a chat put on their website, then I encourage you to talk to Alex, and they can just send you an email. Alex, how should they do that?
Yeah, so my email is just Alex, A-L-E-X, at the letter N, G-A-G-E, live.com. And I'll shoot out a little follow-up email so you have my contact information. But we are running a little promotion for the webinar. If you sign up a new site, either if you're an existing client and adding on a new one or a new client, we're giving you 10 free chats, or 10 free leads rather. So holler at me. This offer expires on Friday, so
that's not
yeah,
insignificant. That's like $350.
Yeah.
Right? That's
yeah,
$350
yeah.
cash money from Alex. Good job, Alex.
You'd be losing money not to.
That's right.
That
We just can't help it. No, I'm just kidding. All right. Well, anybody that wants more information about that, I endorse it. I have seen clients explode their conversion after adding chat, after arguing with me for months and months and months and months, and then finally getting them to do it. One client, Bill Turley, good guy out in San Diego, increased conversion by 270% just by adding chat. So that's a big number, but I've seen it. It works. If you don't have it, try it. And these are the guys to work with. They are the Ferrari of chat platforms out there. There's a lot of other players, but they're cheap and nowhere near as good at all the parts of chat like Alex is, and he's very much involved from the beginning to the end and always answers his phone just like he's told you guys to. So Alex, thanks again, buddy, for jumping on the call with us, and thanks to everybody that has attended, and we will wrap this up and send a note with the podcast and the presentation to everybody, right, Molly? Molly's making symbols at me. Very good. All right. Thanks again, Alex. Talk to you soon, buddy.
Absolutely.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great Thanksgiving. Take care.
You too. Bye.